Hi, welcome back to the show. This is Whitney, and I am thrilled to have Joe Sanok joining us on the podcast today. We are going to be diving into the 4-day work week. Now, I also have a very special announcement to share with you at the end and something new I'll be doing on the podcast starting next week, so stay tuned for that at the end. Now, in this episode today, Joe and I will be chatting about the concept of the 4-day work week, inspired by Joe's book, Thursday is the New Friday, How to Work Fewer Hours, Make More Money, and Spend Time Doing What You Want. A bit about Joe. So his book, Thursday is the New Friday, is a transformative guide that helps individuals enhance their productivity and creativity by working fewer hours, freeing up more time for personal pursuits. This innovative approach has been featured in leading publications like Forbes and Harvard Business Review and discussed on the Smart Passive Income podcast with Pat Flynn, which ranks among the top 50 podcasts globally, over 100,000 downloads each month, that podcast. Joe's influence extends beyond writing. He's hosted over 1,000 podcast episodes in the past decade, interviewing best-selling authors, thought leaders, scholars, and innovators across various industries. And I was even on a guest on Joe's podcast a few months ago. So Joe is wonderful, and I am just really excited for you to hear our conversation. He is just a wealth of knowledge. So let's dive in. Hello, and welcome back to the show, and welcome, Joe. Thank you so much for being here. I am so excited to talk about this topic.
Oh, Whitney, I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah. All right. So we're just going to dive right in today in the interest of like, hey, let's get to it. So we're talking about the 4-day work week. And I really want to know, do you practice what you preach? Do you live the 4-day work week, Joe?
I don't. I live the 3-day work week.
Twist.
I know. You're like, wait, what? No, yeah. So I decided that I didn't want to work on Mondays either. So once in a while, I'll have a couple meetings on a Monday, or like we just started doing the podcast 5 days a week. So we've squeezed in a couple interviews there, but I never have regularly scheduled things on a Monday, and Fridays I'm always off. So, and that's really, I'm a single dad with almost full custody of my kids. So I want to walk my daughter to school, and we live a block and a half from the elementary school. The whole neighborhood walks together. My sister lives in the neighborhood, so we see my 3 nieces every single morning. So they get dropped off right before 9. I walk back and talk to my sister every morning for a block or so and catch up. And then I don't want to dive right into the day right away, so I start at 9:30, and then I almost always wrap up at 3:30 so that I can walk and go pick up my kid from school in the same way. So to me, it's really important at this phase of life where they're younger to have that time together. And so I structure my business around it that way.
Yeah. Wow. That's really inspiring to hear that you've made it work for you, and also that you've put those things that are important to you in your life first, because I think it can be really challenging as business owners to find that balance where, it's also like, well, is balance really even real? It's more about prioritizing and saying what's going to be the priority. And like you mentioned, in this phase of your life, being with your kids is critical and important, and still making your business work and flow is up there too. So what was like the biggest challenge when you started? Like, have you been doing this for a while, the 3-day work week, or like what kind of brought you to this point?
Yeah, no, for a long time until I left my full-time job, I was working a 40-hour work week and then doing the podcast and consulting, and had a counseling private practice on top of that. So that was more of a 50-hour work week. And then when my youngest was born, I took the full Family Medical Leave Act and worked 20 hours a week at the community college I was working at, and then worked at my private practice. And during that time, I started taking Wednesdays off because that just, with scheduling, made the most sense. And so kept that going, and then eventually left that full-time job, realized I was making more in my part-time job than I had ever been making in my full-time job. And then that first summer said, okay, I'm going to continue this, going to take every Friday off and just see how it goes. And June of that summer was the most profitable month we had had. July was more profitable from that, and August was more profitable than that. And so, I learned a ton of lessons that now inform those decisions. But I do think that doing experiments like that challenge the way that we think to then say, okay, could my life be more in line with what I would hope it would be? Do I really have to wait till I make X number of dollars to be able to spend more time with my kids, or to make dinner every night, or whatever the thing is that you want to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great to get started. And so in the book, you argue that we as a culture potentially have been moving towards a 4-day work week or 4-day work week for a while. Why do you make that argument? What's behind that?
Yeah, there's so much history that would be too long to dig into, but it just real briefly, if we go back thousands of years, when I started writing the book, I wanted to figure out like where did time or the way we view time even come from? Because like a day makes sense, a year makes sense. Months are loosely associated with the lunar cycle, but like a week, 7 days doesn't make sense at all. There's nothing in nature that points to 7. It was actually the Babylonians that they looked up, they saw the sun, the moon, they saw Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and then they looked down and they saw Earth. So 7 major celestial things, and they said, let's do a 7-day week. The Egyptians had an 8-day week. The Romans had a 10-day week. In the 1800s, the Russians tried out a 5-day week. So even this thing that we think is solid, a week, is totally made up by humans, by bad astronomers in Babylon. So in the 1800s, people were working farmers' schedules. They were working 10 to 14-hour days, 6 to 7 days a week. So people were working all the time. And then there was some protests and different things that happened in the late 1800s, 1886. 40 years after these major protests, Henry Ford in 1926, to the day, May 1926, launches the 40-hour work week. So it's a huge step in the evolution of humans that even happened. So if we just say less than 100 years ago, the 40-hour work week started. So this thing that, again, we think is so solid, like the week, was just made up by a human who wanted to sell more cars to his own staff. That's literally why Henry Ford did it. He's like, if people want to leave Detroit, if they have a car, they'll be able to do it way faster. He paid to have the roads paved even because he knew he'd sell cars to his own staff. And so we think about it, the baby boomers were like the first kids raised by people that had loosely a 40-hour work week. Gen X and millennials, we were only the second generation that were raised by 40-hour work week people. And so the kids were raising, with gig economies, we could argue that, with inflation and other things, maybe we're no longer at a 40-hour work week. But we see that in the 90s and 2000s, there's a rise of casual Fridays, Gene Fridays. It's when we start doing team building activities or do a baby shower for Shannon, who's, about to have a kid, that Fridays are not a fully worked day. And so we see that then in the pandemic, that was the final nail in the coffin, that we realized that we could do our jobs. We could also learn how to make sourdough and watch Tiger King all within that 40 hours. So it's one of those things that it's like the KPI, the key performance indicator, was sitting in a chair for 40 hours. We realized that's a really dumb KPI. Instead, it's like, well, what can Whitney do? How is she making money for the business? How is she vision, creative, whatever the thing is. So the shift for people that are living as a post-industrialist is we're going to look at something other than just sitting in a chair as the best KPI.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I think that's so helpful to understand the background behind it and the history on it, because then it also allows you to start becoming free of it when you know that this is just created. I think, though, of course, the cultural aspects of it can make it tough, where it's like, well, I'm the only one not working this day, and you can have some guilt around that and whatnot. And then in the book, you talk about these internal inclinations as well. Can you take us through those?
Yeah, so the flow of the book starts with knowing ourselves internally, and there's 3 internal inclinations that top performers have based on the research. Then after that, we talk about why slowing down before we do good work is the best way to kind of spur on creativity and get the most out of our brains. And then when we actually work, we want to use the neuroscience to be as smart as possible to get things done and to absolutely kill it in the areas that matter instead of just doing it everywhere. So those internal inclinations are, first, curiosity. Second is an ability to move on it, so not being paralyzed by perfection. And then we want to be able to really think differently in some of those different areas. So if we first think about curiosity, it was probably a month ago or so, my nieces were over and they were playing with my daughters, and then it got really quiet. And every parent knows, like, when it gets quiet, like, that's not good. So yeah. I look outside and they are all around just this idea of, or they saw this like dead mouse and they're just like quiet around it. And they start all these questions around like, well, should we do a mouse funeral, or will an owl eat it? Or should we like bury it? Or do mice want to be buried? And it's just this sweet little conversation. They were curious. And so top performers maintain that curiosity, because as kids, when we look at things, we're asking ourselves, is this how life is? Are there dead mice every day that I haven't noticed? Are there car accidents every day? Are there rainbows every day and I just never noticed it? Or is this something unique that I need to look out for? And so we want to maintain that curiosity as leaders, where we do a pay-per-click ad campaign that totally fails. We just had this happen. We dropped like $20,000 on pay-per-click to have a worse registration than we had when we did it without hiring an agency. Oh. Now, yes, that's like a gut punch. If I follow my own advice, I'm curious around what happened. I'm digging into it and not just saying pass, fail. Next, we want to look at that ability to move on it, to not get paralyzed by perfection, and to be able to move forward in areas. There's areas we want to have really clear focus and perfection. Like if I go to brain surgery, I want that person to take their time and do it perfect. But most of what we do in business and life, we can do our best shot and then adjust as we go. And then that last area is an outsider perspective. There was a research study that was done that looked at how people from the outside have undue influence over the internal community. And so they had these 6 people that were sitting around, and they would show them a color that was either blue or green. And then they'd hold up a thing that said blue or green. And there was colors that were sort of in the middle, and there was colors that were definitely blue and definitely green. And so, people are holding it up, and then in the middle of it, they brought in these outsiders that were part of the research team. And for some that were very obvious greens, they would hold up a blue. And then for other ones that were very obvious blue, they'd hold up a green. And they found that they could sway that audience to think completely different than what they had been doing before it. We've seen this when we move into like a new job or we have someone else come into our company. They oftentimes have more outside influence. So if we can identify where we're at in those 3 areas, we have a whole assessment within the book. It helps us say, okay, here's my starting point. It's not pass fail, but it's maybe I'm not naturally as curious as I could be, or maybe I don't have an outsider perspective. Here's some activities I can do to put myself in the minority, to put myself in a different situation, to be able to build up that outsider perspective and to then bring that back into my life and into the company culture.
Oh, wow. Oh, that was great. There's a lot there. So some of what we're saying too, it's not enough to just say that you want to work a 4-day work week or say, well, I have things that I need to do and I'm just going to go do them. The opposite side of that coin is, well, I have work to do, and how is that work going to get done? And it's both committing to breaking the mold a little bit and saying, I'm going to work the hours and the days that I want to work, but then also how can we internally improve our own productivity and how we're approaching work so that we can still perform at the level that we want to, and also not feel like we're cutting ourselves short or something by also saying, well, now you have one less day to get all your work done. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just this morning, one of our key staff members in our C-suite let me know earlier in this week, we had a whole 2025 visioning meeting. Like, so excited. We're going to get leaner. We're going to go back to the basics. That her doctor told her that she needs to take at least 2 weeks off, if not months, because of burnout and health and all sorts of other things. Oh. Now, I, of course, first and foremost, want my staff to always feel like they can go after their health and that working at Practice the Practice is not something that hurts their health. That's a posture I have towards my business. And I want her to do that. And to your question, it's an opportunity for us to say, if this person is doing all these things and we can't do all these things, we need to look at what is the best ROI on our team's time. And that's the exact same thing that happens when we start to eliminate 1 day a week from just our general work, is we start to look at what is the very best use of my time. So there's a British researcher named Parkinson. Parkinson's law is something that most people know half of. So the part that most people hear is that work expands to the time given. So in college, you remember you have a paper due tomorrow. You stay up till 4 a.m. It's not your best paper, but you get a C or a B and you don't tank the class. If you have a month and you remember it, you go to the writing center, it takes you that full time also. The other side of Parkinson's law is the natural bloating of organizations. So he looked at the British Navy. He looked at how if any new sign-off piece of paper approval was added to that system of the Navy, it was near impossible to pull it back out, because the assumption is someone smarter than me knew that we need to have someone sign both the yellow sheet and the pink sheet even though we could just have one sheet we sign and make a photocopy or just do it digitally, but they were smarter than I am. It's near impossible to pull that back out of the system. So organizations have a natural bloating that happens when they're doing those things. So those two sides of Parkinson's law actually work together in the 4-day work week, where if I'm working fewer hours and I know that I have 20 things I need to do in any given week, but now I only have time to do 15 to 16, I'm going to do the highest level of things that I can do. So for me, that's coming on podcasts like this. It's doing my own podcast. It's doing the consulting where it comes through at a much higher rate. It's going to be talking to sponsors that maybe, are going to come on as a $50,000 sponsor next year. Those are the things that I'm going to focus on. Am I going to focus on my email? No. I check my email for about 15 minutes twice a week, and I have someone else that goes through most of it. And so that's just not a great use of my time. Now, if I have a $1,500 a month person that is paying for consulting and they email me, Jen knows to text me and say, hey, Joe, Whitney just texted you or just sent you a message. You probably should respond because she's a consulting client. So then we start to get more strategic with the ROI of our time, and it allows our team to then do the other things or for us to just eliminate the things that were dead weight.
Yeah, that's because I think a lot of us, sometimes we do view everything on this flat level playing field of like all of these things have the same priority. They're all coming in, but it is about ruthless prioritization. I too am just I feel like I spend a fair bit of my day sometimes prioritizing my to-do list, but I feel then it does allow me to make sure each day I'm spending the dedicated time and energy into the things that are the most valuable. And then if something gets moved enough times, it's time to start thinking, okay, does this really need to happen? And even just your example of organizations adding new things and all of that, I even found recently in our business something where it was taking too much time and I'd never questioned it. I just thought that was the way it was. And I think this can be for so many people, a way that you're serving your clients, a process that you have in your business, either with client delivery or in your business. And taking that second look and saying, does this really have to be this way? Maybe this can take less time, and because our time is our most valuable asset. I feel like that's pretty trite to say, but it's so true. We had to pause for a sec for some tech challenges, but we are back. And so, Joe, I want to now talk a little bit about hustle culture. And, you mentioned something a little bit earlier about slowing down versus killing it, and, how we can kind of slow down in order to really unlock more productivity and creativity and all of that. But definitely hustle culture is a thing. And so how does all of that play in, and like, how does that work?
Yeah, I think when we think about the problem is we see social media, we see TikTok, we see Instagram, we see these people that are, quote, successful. And they may or may not be successful. They may or may not, be living their dream life. And oftentimes it's, I haven't had a weekend in 20 years, or, I get up at 4 a.m. and I'm like, that just sounds terrible. Like, what kind of life do you live if you have to do all that? And when we really look at the neuroscience, we make our best decisions when we slow down first. Our best ideas come when we're in the shower, when we're out for a walk. The first 10 seconds of any meditation I do, I usually keep a notepad next to me because all these things that I was supposed to do, I totally forgot about, and they all come flooding in. So our brains, when they're in that constant hypervigilance, can't do good work. We're going to make more mistakes. We're not going to be productive. It's like I do the Sudoku puzzles. If I'm stuck and I walk away and come back the next day, I see like, oh my gosh, there was a 7 in that box. It's so like right there. Our brains need that break. And the neuroscience points to that as well, that there's ways that we can optimize our brains, that we can get more done in a shorter period of time if we actually use what the neuroscience is teaching us.
And that's the challenge, right? Is like actually using that and slowing down and bucking that idea that we always need to be hustling. And also, to your point, thinking that everyone else around us is hustling just because we're seeing those highlights on Instagram of all the things that they're achieving, when maybe those people are successful because they are actually taking a 4-day work week or a 3-day work week, but they're not necessarily talking about it. They're taking that time off potentially, or they maybe are burning out, and that's definitely not the lifestyle I want for myself either.
Yeah.
And sacrificing other things.
And most of the people I know that are ultra successful aren't even on social media. They're not saying, here's
That's a
what
very
I
good
do.
point.
It's like, I have a friend that was a multimillionaire before he graduated high school. He started this website that rocked it out. In 1998, the guy was a multimillionaire at age 18. The dude's not on social media. He's not telling people how rich he is or how much his lifestyle's awesome. He just lives it, and like, so the people that are bragging about it probably aren't even the people you want to be teaching you. So a few of the concepts, though, around the neuroscience, we do this thing with our consulting clients called the +1 - 1 exercise. So whether or not you have a 3-day weekend, you can do this. The shift from industrialist thinking to post-industrialist is that industrialists said, here is the exact formula. Here's the recipe. Here's the prescription. You plug it in, you get a Model T on the other side. Whereas post-industrialists view it more like a menu. We're going to try different things and build out the menu around what works. So it's a little more spaghetti at the wall type of approach to our lives. And we're making it an iteration process where we're getting better and better at running our lives. So the +1 - 1 exercise, you go into the weekend and you think, what's something I can add, that's the +1, to my weekend that may make me a little more just myself by the end of the weekend. Instead of the weekend being responsive to the week before, where we had a busy week, now I'm going to drink too much, I'm going to sleep too much, I'm going to just sit around. Instead of it being reactionary, we want it to be preparatory. We want it to be preparation, where we're doing things on the weekend that help us bounce into the next week. So what's something that I can do that helps me rejuvenate differently? So I want to drink green tea and read some novel on Saturday morning without my kids interrupting me for just like 22 minutes. So we need to communicate to the kids. We need to communicate if there's a partner, set some clear boundaries and say, listen, I'm going to try to do this for 22 minutes. And if we can make it to 30 minutes, we're all going to do high fives, or we're going to go to the park, or maybe you don't do anything. You just say, I deserve this. So we're going to add something in. The -1 is we're going to remove something. And so maybe you're scheduled to go get coffee with a friend that you know is a toxic friend, and that every time you hang out with them, you feel like trash. And we're all too old to have toxic friends. You're allowed to say, you know what, I don't want to go out for coffee. Maybe you test it out another weekend and you say, I really don't want to go grocery shopping and fight all these people to get groceries, and it's worth the tip and the cost to pay an extra $20 to save 2 hours of my weekend. Or for me, I live in northern Michigan. I did this once, and I realized that blowing the snow off my driveway, it's not a big driveway, but it's a weird shape where you end up blowing snow onto spots you've already removed the snow, and it's just a pain. And I'd spend, an hour and a half doing this stupid driveway in the dark, because it gets dark at like 4 p.m. here in the winter. And I pay $35 for a guy to come and plow it, and he probably does it 10 times a winter. So for $350, I get hours of my life with my daughters back. And so as we start to build our +1 - 1, it allows us then to start to say, okay, I'm feeling off this week or this weekend. What can I do? Okay, I want some energy, and I'm not going to drink any more coffee after 1 o'clock, but maybe a green smoothie is helpful. I found that helped last week. I'm going to try it again and put some chia seeds in it. So then we start to build this whole menu of life that helps us then be better in work and in the way that we respond to the people in our lives.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think it's so critical to be like reflecting on those things and doing things with purpose and intentionality, because there are so many different things that we can be doing. And if we're just maybe, I'm going to go shopping because that makes me feel better, but then really thinking about like, is this really rejuvenating me? Is this giving me energy? Or what is it that I truly need? And I love that idea of not being reactionary in your weekend, because I agree, like the weekend, it can almost feel like this punishment of like, well, now I worked so hard over the week and now I get to do some chores and errands and basically have guilt for half of Sunday or dread until Monday, comes. And like, that's just that's not the way to live. And just this whole idea that you need to rejuvenate yourself in order to do your best work. You're going to enjoy your work more. I mean, for myself, I found that like I have a formula in the mornings for my morning routine. I have to do some kind of movement, I need to meditate, and I need to journal. And usually if I have to drop something, it's okay. I need to do at least one or two of those things. But when I've got 3 going, that allows me to start my day not in a reactionary, like, oh, immediately I get out of bed, brush my teeth, and then I have to answer my emails. Instead, I'm in charge of how I approach the day, the work day. And I feel like that has some similarities to what you're talking about in terms of the weekend, kind of take control of how you approach the work week ahead.
Yeah. And I think that then when we are in the work week, there's this idea that we always have to have, say a 4-day work week to be effective. There's so many micro things that we can do when we're in it to enact this use of our brains differently. The University of Illinois had a really interesting study where they looked at vigilance, decrement. So vigilance, how well we pay attention to something, decrement meaning going down over time. So the idea was that, like a glass of water, when you're out of the energy, out of the focus, your vigilance just goes down and you're worse at a task at the end of the task than at the beginning. And so they did this study where they brought in students, and for an hour they gave them a random 4-digit number, say it was 2341. So 2341, whenever that comes up, you're going to push a button, and there's going to be other 4-digit numbers that come up, don't push the button. Super boring task. At the end, they had experienced vigilance decrement. They did a worse job at the end paying attention to the 4-digit number than they did at the beginning. Now, at the 1/3 mark with the second group, they gave them a 1-minute break. They said something like, we put you on the wrong computer, sit here for just a minute, we're going to put you on a different computer. Or they said, we're required to give you a 1-minute break, just hang tight. No one had phones, there was no magazines, there was no TV, just literally a 1-minute break. Go on the computer, do another third of the study, do another 1-minute break, and then do the last third of the study. So they literally had 2 minutes in a whole hour. They experienced zero vigilance decrement. Zero. So they paid attention as well at the very end as they did at the beginning. And that's because our brains, when it's interrupted, they're still primitive. They're looking for the tiger. They're looking for the difference. It's looking for, is this a safe environment, even if I'm in my home office? And so little things like that, the research is showing us, if you set a timer and disrupt tasks in the middle of it, it's easier to jump back in. If you whiteboard out at the end of your week all the things that are on your mind for next week, your brain's subconsciously going to work on some of those things, and you're going to have aha moments right away. If you change the environment of your office for different tasks and have different lighting and different sound for different parts of what you're doing, you get things done faster and drop into flow state quicker. So there's all these things that we can be doing to maximize the time we are working so that then we have more time in the time that we're not working.
I love that. Yeah, just like these micro things that maybe you're not ready to go straight to the 4-day work week or whatever, but you can still make these gains. And, this is something even I talk about with my clients when they're working on their website copy, for example. And I say, do not try and go through it all in one go. Take breaks, and there's so many things like that in our business where we think like, just power through it, just get it done. But it really is diminishing returns at some point. And you're not cheating yourself. You're not giving up by taking a break. You are rejuvenating your brain, and the science proves it.
Yeah, well, and even just thinking through, like, when is my energy best? I know that between 10 a.m. and probably noon is like the prime time. So that's when I need to have the things that require my most focus. So am I going to check email from 9:30 till 10 so that I have just spent a bunch of my energy on like usually useless energy drains? No. I'm going to do things like I might have a consulting call that's going to like really get me pumped up. And then it's like I have some podcasts. And so thinking through what are those high level things that are core for you as the business owner or whatever your role is, that's going to then help you in a much different way than if you just are letting everyone else's agendas dictate what you're supposed to do.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, and I time blocked in the past. I don't do it as much as I should, but I would put blocks on my calendar where it's like the beginning of the day is for the deep focus, deep work, and end of the day is for admin, smaller stuff where, it's paying bills, balancing my books, like, stuff I can do a little bit with my eyes closed. Shouldn't, but much easier stuff. Yeah.
Well, even as you say, I time blocked and then I didn't. One thing I talk about in the book is your sprint type. So similar to like your Enneagram type or disc profile, a lot of people like you have said, I've tried sprinting, I've tried batching, it just didn't really work for me, or it's not a habit and I don't know why. And almost always it's they don't know their sprint type profile. So there's actually two different areas that we look at when we look at determining your sprint type. So the first one is a time block sprinter, and the second one is a task switch sprinter. So a time block sprinter is someone who the task is just one thing. So I wrote Thursday is the new Friday on Thursdays. So that was like one task, I'm writing a book. A task switcher is someone that needs some variety. Now, you're not multitasking. The myth of multitasking is that it helps you multitask. You get less done. But it's saying, I need high-level things. So I'm going to work on the marketing plan for next year. I'm going to then work on sponsors for the podcast. I'm going to work on finding stellar guests, whatever it is. And you're going to break that up into 20 to 40 minutes, depending on your energy level. Now, those people need that variety for their sprint type. The other part of it is, when are we sprinting? And so are we an automated sprinter where we are saying, okay, every Thursday, I'm going to write Thursday is the new Friday. It's just on repeat. Thursdays, that's what I do. The first Monday of the month, I talk money with my accountant. It's just automated within it. Or are we an intensive sprinter, meaning we have to get away to go do things? So my friend Dr. Jeremy Sharp has the Testing Psychologist podcast. And he, a couple times a year, goes and gets an Airbnb that's in a different town, often he has to fly there. It has to be walking distance from vegan restaurants because he doesn't want to have to worry about parking. He wants indoor and outdoor spaces so that he can adjust his environment based on what he's working on. And he brings a bunch of high-level things to work on. And so he'll take 2 or 3 days, he'll go there, he'll dig in, and then he'll come home and not worry about those things as much. And so he knows that he needs to go have an intensive with himself to work on all these things to get it done. I know that I can't get away as a single dad to do that, and it's not really my natural posture either. My sprint type is more, it's in my calendar, I'm going to do it, just put it on repeat. And so often if we look at our sprint type, we can actually get more done because it's aligning with our natural inclinations.
Oh man, I love that. That's a great way to kind of end it and just give some great additional insights, because I really, I kind of had that feeling like, well, maybe this just doesn't work for me in this specific way. And sometimes it can be tough because we see advice out there and then we think that, well, something's wrong with me if it's not working for me in this way. But to your point, there's multiple different ways to go about it, and you really need to stay true to who you are and your inclinations and the ways that you like to work, and then lean into it. So I love it. Well, Joe, you've been like such a wealth of knowledge. This has been so wonderful, and all the studies that you've brought in here. I really I think that this has been super in-depth and great. And so for anyone listening, where can they go to find out more about you, work with you, learn from you?
Yeah, so we have over 1,100 episodes of the Practice podcast, so you can always come check that out. We help people build thriving private practices they absolutely love. So whether you're in counseling, social work, life coach, anyone with a private practice, we have membership communities that can help you with every phase of practice. And so we have ones for people just getting started all the way through mega group practices. So we have community, we have live teachings 3 days a week, and then we have over 30 e-courses our members get access to. So they can read all about that over at practiceofthepractice.com/membership.
Wonderful. Oh, we'll put that in the show notes. That sounds great, especially I think aligning with someone like you where you're really focused on both having that successful business, but having it be something that fulfills you and that you enjoy and love. And I know it's just so important when you're looking for an advisor or a coach to have someone who really is respecting that we're still people. We need our business to support us. And it's not about just driving for, the 6-figure, 7-figure business and all of that. So I love that.
Well, thank you so much. This has been lots of fun.
Yes, thanks so much for being here, Joe. Okay, what do you think? What about you? Would you be excited to try a 4-day work week? Or are you already embracing it in your routine? And what about the inclinations and sprint types and all the science that Joe talked about in today's episode? I got a lot of insights from it, and I just love the fact of really giving yourself that permission to work the way you want to work and really improve your productivity at the same time. So lots of really great tips in that conversation. And it's definitely something I try to practice myself so much in my life with my slightly unconventional work-life balance of traveling while working. Sometimes I'm going for long weekends or doing trips in the middle of the week. And really it's all about finding ways to be productive and letting go of those ideas that I need to be butt in chair 5 days a week. So lots of cool ideas from that. Now, make sure that you check out the show notes to get that link that Joe shared for his membership and all the different memberships that you can join. It really sounds like there's just something for everyone, depending on what kind of practice you want to be building and where you are in your business. I think getting that community and guidance from someone like Joe is just so invaluable. So make sure you check that out. Now, I promised a special announcement. Thanks for hanging on until the end. So it's the time of year when we start thinking about our goals for 2025. Maybe you are brainstorming the projects you want to tackle, the areas in your business you want to improve, or even the new tactics that you had been hoping to implement, maybe some things that you've learned on this podcast. Now, I know it can feel overwhelming figuring out what to prioritize and what you need to prepare for the new year. Well, I've got just the thing to help. Starting next week, I'm launching a special 3-part podcast series designed to set you up for massive success in 2025, specifically when it comes to your website. Whether you are looking to launch a new site or upgrade the one you have, I will be sharing exactly how to make sure your website is ready to propel you and your business forward. We are going to be diving deep into what most websites are missing and how to turn yours into a powerful sales system that is going to do the hard work for you. It's going to help you get more clients, save you time, and make marketing a whole lot easier too. So I've got plenty of bonuses and goodies lined up along the way, and trust me, you do not want to miss this. So if you want to make sure that you're notified when the first part of the series drops, make sure you head over to whitneybateson.com/pod newsletter. It's all just one word, POD newsletter. That's in the show notes too, to join my email list, and you'll get an email as soon as the series goes live. So get ready for an exciting and game-changing series. I'm excited about this. It's the first time I'm doing it. I look forward to catching you on the podcast next week. Thanks for listening.